this is a highlight from the Mission 5, Next Generation Biometrics System, and I would like to give you a short context why we selected this highlight topic. The topic that we will talk about is stemming back to a European project we run from 2012 to 2016, looking at passports and vulnerability in passport issuing processes. So we found a severe vulnerability that was made public in 2014-15, and then we started to working on countermeasures. So these are the countermeasures that we are now having in ATHENE as our research topic. And what is interesting about this highlight is that there is a strong impact on society. And as a matter of fact, as we speak, the German parliament is discussing a revision of the passport law because of the problem that now Ulrich Scherhag, a young, ambitious senior researcher who will defend his PhD thesis soon, will present to you. Thank you.
So thank you for the introduction, Christoph. Yeah, as already said, the topic of the presentation will be deep face representation for differential morphing attack detection. And the agenda will be as follows. First, I will talk a bit about morphing attacks in general. Then I will present a few morphing attack approaches that are existing. I will present the database I created, show some results on this database, and I will conclude with the third-party results. And so first, what are morphing attacks? A morphing attack is, or morphing in general, is if you take two images, for example, an image of Professor Bush and an image of myself, and you create an image that somehow comprises the biometric and visual information of both those contributing subjects. And that's an issue with morphing, because in a normal scenario, you would expect if you compare a sample of Christoph to another sample of Christoph, you will get a high similarity score. And for images of myself, it's the same. You will also get a high similarity scores if you compare them. But in a proper working face recognition system, if you compare an image of myself to an image of Christoph, you will get a low similarity score. But if you compare images of Christoph or myself to the morphed image, you will get a rather high similarity score, which in this case would be above the threshold of 0.5. Thus, this image will successfully match against both of our images. And that's an issue because we can create a real-world attack scenario out of this. If I'm a wanted criminal, and I need a German passport, I can ask Christoph as my accomplice to apply for a passport using this morphed image. And if the guy at the application desk does not notice the manipulation of the image, Christoph will receive a valid German passport with a morphed passport image in it. And using this passport, myself as well as Christoph are able to pass, for example, the border gate at Frankfurt Airport. And that's not only a scientific topic, but as Christoph already told, they are discussing this in politics. And there's been a case in Germany where the so-called Peng Collective created a morphed passport of a group member and a Libyan guy. And they claimed to send this morphed passport to Libya so this person could travel to Germany. Yeah, and that gave a big uproar in media and as a consequence also in politics. So it's clear there's a need for morph attack detection approaches. And in general, we can divide the morphing attack detection methods into two schemes. The first is single image morphing attack detection, where we only have the suspected face image, for example, the image handed over at the application desk during the application process. Using this image, we can extract features, use the extracted feature vector for classification. We obtain our morph attack detection score. And using this score, we can derive a decision if it's a bona fide, so a valid image, or a morphed image. And using these schemes, it's possible to detect morphing artifacts like ghost artifacts. I will show later some examples for this. But if you create morphed images by hand, you can avoid those artifacts. So there's a second scheme for morphing attack detection. It's called differential morphing attack detection. Here you have, in addition to the suspected face image, a trusted live capture. For example, during the eGate process, where in addition to the image stored in the passport, you get an image captured by the eGate itself. And from both images, features are extracted. Those features are somehow compared. And the classifier trains and classifies based on the differences. And again, you obtain a morph attack detection score where you can derive your decision if it's a bona fide or a morphed image. And for feature extraction, in my thesis, I evaluated a lot of different feature extractors and a lot of different classifiers in combination. For example, texture descriptors that aim to describe the texture in the image and aim to detect faulty areas in the image forensic analysis, landmark-based approaches, and deep face representations. And so far, it turns out that deep face representations are most suitable for the differential detection scenario. And deep face representations are adapted from the idea of deep face recognition systems. So here's a scheme of a deep face recognition system where you have your reference and your probe image. You use a neural network to extract the deep feature representations from the images, the so-called embeddings. And the embeddings of the reference and the probe image are compared in most cases using Euclidean distance. And you obtain your distance score based on which you can decide if both images match or not. And I adapted this for morphing attack detection. Now here we have our passport again and our trusted live capture. I do some pre-processing, so proper alignment of the faces, etc. And in the next step, I use the deep feature extraction of a face recognition system, obtain those features, combine them, use machine learning to derive the decision if it's a bona fide or a morphed image. And if you're interested in the detailed implementation, how this is done, we published at TIFS, at the Transaction on Information Forensics and Security, about this, where we describe in detail how this works. To evaluate this approach, we need a database, and up to date, there is no morphing or database of morphed images that can be used to train differential morphing attack detection systems. So I had to create my own one. And for a morphing database that's able to resemble the process at the gate, we need two types of images. First, passport images, which can be assumed to be ICAO compliant because that's checked during the application process. They may be printed and scanned, as they're, in Germany at least, can be handed over in a printed form at the application desk. And they are JPEG 2000 compressed when stored into the passport. And the second type of images are the gate images. And there the environment is semi-controlled, so we cannot control how the subject behaves. So we might have pose variations, different expressions, lack of sharpness or motion blur, and further alterations in the image. And in addition, many eGates only provide grayscale images. So for the database creation, I used two databases, first Ferret and second FRGCB2. The potential probe and reference images are selected by hand. And further, I used 4 different morphing algorithms to create those morphs. The morphing pairs are also selected by hand. For example, you have to take into account if you morph 2 subjects wearing glasses. The morphed image will get some strange double glass artifacts. And the finished database was resized to passport format, printed and scanned, and compressed with JPEG 2000 to 15 kilobyte, which is exactly what you can expect from a passport. Here are examples of the database of the bona fide images. So here we have the original image, the resized image that doesn't change that much, the image in JPEG 2000 compression, and here you can see that it gets smoother. The printing and scanning adds some artifacts here in the lower line and a lot of noise and smoothness to the image. And in the last step, the printed and scanned image is compressed with JPEG 2000 again, and here you can see that it's very noisy and a lot of texture is lost. Here are examples for the 4 morphing algorithms. Face Morpher is available on GitHub. It's an open source morphing tool. OpenCV was implemented by myself using the OpenCV library. Face Fusion is a commercial morphing software, and UBO Morpher is the morphing tool provided by the University of Bologna. And here you can see those shaded artifacts I talked about earlier. And the Face Fusion and UBO Morpher avoid those artifacts by cropping the inner part of the face and pasting it into a non-altered version of the image. So the results, first I evaluated if or created morphs are a threat to face recognition systems. So here you can see for the ferret and the FRGC database, the results on a commercial face recognition system. In red, the imposter comparisons, in green, the genuine comparisons, and in different colors, the morphing attacks. And our threshold was set to a false match rate of 0.1%, as it's recommended for border control processes. And you can see all the morphs are accepted for ferret. For FRGC, you can see that already the genuine comparisons are less similar. That's due to the fact that FRGC contains much more variation in the probe images. And this also has an influence on the morphed images. But as you can see, most comparisons are still above the threshold. The first experiment was to evaluate if any of those feature extractors in combination with classifiers are suitable to detect anyhow morphing attacks. And the current state of the art of morphing attack detection is LBP or HOC. And here you can see that on our database, we are able to detect images with a above 20% detection equal error rate, or for HOC above 15%. And the deep face representations achieve error rates below 3%. If we resize the images, the detection equal error rates are not affected that much, so for any algorithm. But if we apply JPEG 2000 compression, you see that LBP, the detection error rate of ABP, increases a lot because of the lack of texture. But the deep face recognition, deep face representation is still very stable, around 3%. And for the printed and scanned version of the images, you can see that for the deep face representations, in some parts, the detection equal error rate even decreases. And if you do machine learning, it's always important to verify your results on different databases. So we handed this algorithm in for the NIST morphing report. And here you can see in this bluish and the yellow line, they are the HDA DFR, so deep face representation algorithms, and they are below all other algorithms besides HDA arcface, and HDA arcface is just the arcface used as deep face representations. So that's it from my side.